Hello and welcome. The next deep dive we're going to do is, of course, Dead Man's Footsteps. This book, Dead Man's Footsteps, is a strange one in a way that it's a global investigation story, which is quite different from the books before, but not the last one to be, because Roy Grace will start to travel far and wide in the coming books, even though it won't be the norm because of police budgets as well. Anyhow, one thing I'd like to mention before we get into it is that I am changing the structure of the story in the deep dive I'm going to talk, because it has loads of back and forth, switching back in time to 2001, 2007, and I believe that I could make it a bit more straightforward and easier if I save this. So everything that happens in the past in the book, I will sum them up every now and again, and the story I will tell, the investigation and the details, from the point of view of present days, in the book's present days, which is 2007. Otherwise, there won't be no changes, even though the action scenes I won't detail that much that I did in the last books, because I realized that it might not be as efficient or interesting, because for that one has to read the book, I believe. I'm here to sum up the thing, I'm here to talk about it in details, and not to make up a story or tell the story again. For that we have Peter James. So let's agree in that one. It won't be too short video either, but I try my best. Let's get into the deep dive. This story starts from New York City. Ronnie Wilson wakes up in a hotel room and he's about to go and bump some money from business associate Donald head cook. And well, Ronnie's a failed businessman, and again he needs some money, and years before, Donald and him had some sort of agreement that Donald would help him again, and that's his last chance saloon, Ronnie's. So he's getting ready, puts his fake watch on, he prepares his stuff, all the looks, he dresses up sharply and goes out from the hotel room straight to the office of Donald head cook, and his office is in the World Trade Center. Riding the subway, he gets to the Twin Towers and 9/11 happens. Yes, we are in 2001. Ronnie Wilson is now given an idea, because in all this turmoil, the catastrophe of 9/11, he realizes it's a perfect opportunity to write off all his debts and change his identity. So that's what he's going to do. And while he's in the Big Apple, he's going to make some connections, and he's going to obtain fake passports. He's going to sell his stamps, because he's got some stamps, and he's going to make a new life for himself. And in his new life, he's going to make some decisions that will not reflect on him very well, but we'll see about this. Instead of switching back and forth between the timelines as the book does, here we will follow the nowadays, 2007, starting from Brighton. And Ronnie Wilson will get back into the tail at certain point, but I will sum up what he's doing in New York and we will switch back to him when it's appropriate. The modern timeline will go on. Indeed, Ronnie Wilson will be a busy man in 2001 New York City. He will meet some Russians in the Moscow bar, and there he meets this guy who will set him up with fake IDs, and he's a person who has his hands everywhere, so mostly they get drunk on vodka, and Ronnie obtains his new identity. So will he get one for his wife, Lauren, and he will deal in stamps at the stamp dealers in New York, and that's how he obtains some money to get his identity switched. I mean, to get the forged passports and all the IDs, visas he may need. And he will visit Australia as well, because this story will cover some of the globe. It will be an international investigation. But let this be enough of Ronnie at this point. Let's get back to 2007, nowadays Brighton, UK. Abby is a young lady. She lives in Brighton, Camptown, just near the sea, in a big block of flats. Looks out from the 7-story window, and she's really worried. She has multiple locks on her door, and she thinks that her ex-boyfriend is out to get her. And she's not too wrong about that. So she's really security conscious. She's basically spending her day isolated in her swanky apartment, and when she goes out late evenings. Very occasionally she mingles with people, like in bars, but then she prefers to go to places where she's not frequenting very often. Her main goal is to set her mother up for her old years to a decent place where she's cared for, and after that she would like to disappear again. Her story, her background story, is a long one. She has met her ex-boyfriend Ricky back in Melbourne, Australia, and they go back a long while. Not that extra long, but still a few years. But now she's on the run from him, because this Ricky character is out to get her, really. And apparently she's got something he needs. We'll look into that a bit later. But tonight, Abby is going out. She has things to do, and she would like to mingle a bit. She needs to be out in the open a little bit. So she waits until darkness falls, steps out of her apartment, locks the place tight, and normally she wouldn't take the elevator because she's a bit claustrophobic, but there are building materials on the stairs making an obstacle challenge to climb down, so she decides she's gonna take the lift. She gets in it, and as the elevator car starts to descend, it just stops, eventually makes very strange noises, falls a little bit more, but gets stopped in the shaft, and she gets stuck in the elevator. The elevator car's tilting, and things don't really look very good to her. Obviously she's panicking, even though she's gonna be there for a while. And things get worse when she gets a text message on her mobile phone. "I know where you are," it reads. Detective Superintendent Roy Grace is just finishing his day at the police headquarters, sitting in his office, finalizing paperwork, when the phone rings. He picks it up and he is called about a skeletal remain found just under the Brighton railway station, where there is a building work going on, and the construction site workers dug under some foundation and found the skeleton in the storm drain. He's not really pleased about it. He was looking forward to a decent sort of weekend, but right now he's not going to get it. And to get him some company as well, he bumps into Glenn Branson, his friend and colleague. Glenn Branson is about to go home, but unfortunately Roy Grace drags him into this investigation, and they go and see the storm drain and the skeletal remains. Also, at the police station, a new man has come to work. Cassian Pugh has arrived. After his leg getting better now due to an accident the taxi cab got involved in, that Pugh had been traveling, he's at the police helping Roy, drafted in by Alison Vosper, the ACC, Roy's boss. And Cassian is supposed to be helping the Brighton and Sussex police to get better, learn from the Metropolitan Police where Cassian Pugh had worked, or does work. It's a bit shady, hazy. Anyhow, he has arrived. Roy is really not happy about it because they don't really see eye to eye, but he's gonna have to put up with Cassian, and Cassian is in the same rank where Roy Grace is, which means they might have some conflict of interest or some sort of challenging attitude towards each other. But at this very moment, Cassian Pugh is to be dealing with the court case files that Roy Grace normally does, and Roy Grace will lead the active investigation. When Cassian Pugh will get involved in the past of Roy Grace, and that will stir up some problems. Arriving to the storm drain with Branson, the cops go into this cavey dugout, little tunnel, and there's this skeleton sitting there, little bits and pieces floating around it. The water had not washed the remains away, but no one really knows how it ended up being here. So they wait for the pathologist to arrive, who is Fraser Theobald, the slow guy. So it's going to be a long time while they're sitting there. And again, because the more the merrier, Roy Grace phones Norman Potting to come to the scene. So Norman Potting gets on the road and arrives. They gather in the Soko van and have a little chat, waiting for the pathologist to deal with stuff, waiting for the crime scene investigation to learn what they can, and trying to keep onlookers at bay. Onlookers with Kevin Spinella among them. Kevin Spinella, the Argos journalist,
He's always there on the scenes. He seems to be really clued up really early, and Roy Gray still doesn't understand who feeds him information, but it's getting to be really bothering and notorious that information is leaking from the police, and this young journalist seems to be right at the scene very fast and seemingly knows everything to be known. And Roy Grace, as usual now, swears to himself that he's going to deal with this and find the leak at one point. But right now he tries to keep on the right side of Spinella because the press and the police need to cooperate to achieve the best results they can. Not to mention, nobody really wants journalists to slate the police, to write terrible articles blaming them. So Roy Grace swallows his anger and has a little chit chat with Kevin Spinella, not really giving too much away, yet the journal will somehow learn little details. Down in the cave, in the excavation dugout, the Soko and Fraser Theobald, they find clues. And one clue is an artificial nail, a piece of artificial nail that doesn't seem to be washed away at all, even though it's still nearby the skeleton. They bag it, tag it, and look into it, but obviously it tells them that it's more likely a woman. But the ID will have to wait for a little bit. After long, long hours of hanging around the scene, trying to gather as much evidence as they can, now the police can tone down the investigation for the day, as the skeletal remains must have been there for years. They reckon it's 5 to 10 years, maybe even longer. That's Fraser Theobald's opinion, but obviously he'll know more the next day. So they call it a day, and Roy Grace set up a briefing for this investigation for the next morning, and he will assemble the team. He likes to choose the usual characters, the usual investigators he normally works with, and that is what's going to happen. But right now, he tells everyone to go home, get a night's rest, and they will meet in the morning briefing, and there will be probably a press conference as well. Roy Grace goes back to Cleo's and finds that Leo had bought a dog, Humphrey. So now they have a dog too. Monday morning sees Roy Grace at the dentist. Steve Cowling, a dentist, have been sent x-rays of the teeth of the storm drain victim, and of course Sandy's, because Roy is still concerned that the victim might be Sandy. But rest assured, the skeletal remains don't belong to Sandy. That's confirmed by Cowling. But Cowling also says that the victim of the storm drain, according to the records, to the dental records, had some seriously expensive job done on her teeth, and suggests Roy to check out a few dentists in the county and nearby towns, because not many dentistry would do that sort of job that had been done on the storm drain victim. So this list with the dentists gets written out for Roy Grace, and Roy passes it on to Norman Potting at the upcoming briefing. And Potting will look into it, and we will learn about it and further details
at the 6:30 p.m. briefing. In the meantime, in Australia, a car is being winched out from a body of water, and in the trunk of the car, a dead body is found. We're gonna check back with those a bit later. Through along the day, Roy Grace also visits, well, being summoned to the top bosses of the police. And there he meets Cassie and Pewey, of course, and Skerritt, one of the main men at the police, tells Roy that now he is going to be his right-hand substitute to the CID, to the Major Crime Unit. So basically, he got now promoted to the top brass section of the police, though his rank will remain the same, and Cassian Pugh is going to have to deal with his court case files that Roy won't have too much time for, considering his new duties will make him rather busy. Well, Cassian Pugh is not too happy about it, of course, and while Roy Grace worries about what Alison Vosper, the ACC, might say, but Skerritt just says, nah, don't bother, I'll deal with her later. While Cassian Pugh moved into Roy's ex-office, he's making himself not busy, but really unbearable already within the first few hours of being at the police station in Sussex. Moaning about staff, he demands his picture to be put on the wall, inch perfect. He's having all sorts of problems with the attitude of people, but at the end of the day, the problem is himself, obviously. So let's leave Cassian Pugh alone for now. We're gonna hear from him enough in this book. After a day and a bit, Abby is freed from the elevator by firefighters. She's helped out from the car, elevator car, gets pulled out. She goes back into her home, and she's rather shaken up, obviously. And she can't shake off her sensation that someone might be following her, considering the text message she'd received. But she's got things to do. Abby phones Global Express because she's got a package to deliver from Brighton Camptown to just outside Brighton. She makes a phone call and arranges a delivery, and she's waiting for the courier to turn up. And as usual, Kevin Spinello's on the case and getting information from all sorts of people and ways he can get his hands on, and soon obviously monitoring emergency channels, radio channels. He had learnt about Abby's ordeal in the elevator, being stuck in. So he decides that for a scoop, for a story in the Argos, he's going to visit this woman and has a chat with her. Spinello finds her registered under the name of Katie. And just before the 6:30 p.m. briefing, a press conference is held. Roy Grace keeps it short and just tells basics about the skeletal remains in the storm drain. Once it's over, he bumps into Kevin Spinello, the journalist, and Kevin tells him about his contact from the fire brigade, reporting him that a woman by the name Katie Jennings have been saved from an elevator that had been stuck for over a day. And Spinello decides he's going to visit it, but suggests that Roy Grace send someone around because he's got bad feeling about her, as Kevin tried to phone her, contact her, but she was dismissive, and Spinello felt she was agitated, anxious,
But who wouldn't be after being stuck in an elevator, right? Anyway, Roy Grace notes the situation and leaving Kevin behind, he decides he's going to post this to the main database so other officers can see it, and hopefully someone will check on it soonish. At the 6:30 briefing, obviously things just start to roll, meaning that Nick Nicol reports only that the DNA samples had been sent off to the lab. It will be a while they see anything from them. Balamoy is organizing resources, checking on outside inquiries, so this will take time as well. But Norman Potting has a valid report to make, and that is regarding the dentist x-rays that had been given to him to go through the list and visit the local dentist branches, the local surgeries, and he had identified the victim of the storm drain through dental records. One of the dentists, Mr. Gabby, knew a bit of the victim, bit of background, and told Potting that apparently the woman had a stormy relationship with the husband, and Potting reports that he's going to revisit the dentist and has a deeper chat about the background of the victim, whose name is Joanna Wilson. And when Roy Grace suggests, so let's locate the husband, and Norman Potting, smug as ever, says that yeah, he would have done that, but unfortunately the husband is dead. Died in 9/11 when the World Trade Center had been attacked. In the evening, Abby is anxious about the courier to arrive, take her delivery. There's a knock on the door eventually. She looks through the peephole and sees a motorbike helmeted man. She kind of hoped it would have been a van driver, but she's gonna have to do with the motorcycle situation. And as she opens the door, she gets wagged, and a familiar voice says to her, "It's good to see you, Abby. I can't say I'm crazy about your new looks," and punches her again. She goes out cold. Now Cassian Pugh is not only annoying staff at the police station, but he is about to embark on a mission and goes to visit Sandy, Roy Grace's missing wife's parents, and talks to them about his concerns regarding Roy Grace was involved in the investigation of the disappearance of Sandy, and since Pugh now is in charge of the court case files, he decides that he's going to reopen them and just reintroduce the parents of Sandy in their Seaford cottage, in their home. And the parents obviously give their okay to this to go ahead, so Roy Grace will find some trouble coming from Cassian Pugh. So Cassian goes back to the police station, makes a few phone calls, then meets up with Alison Vosper in her office. Alison Vosper, the ACC boss of Roy Grace, gives the green light to reinvestigate the missing persons case of Sandy, and also agrees that they shouldn't share this information with Roy Grace. We'll hear about the outcome a bit later. Meantime, Abby finds herself restrained
in her bathroom. Her assailant is none other than her ex-boyfriend, Ricky. Ricky wants to know about stuff, missing stuff that belonged to him, namely some stamps, and explains Abby that it was easy to find her. Ricky obtained a gadget that traces cell phones and can tap into cell phones, listen into them, and learning Abby's phone number, cruising around Camptown, sooner or later he thought he should have been able to locate Abby. And that's what happened. He just spent a few days walking, driving around the area, and eventually, from the incoming and outgoing calls, he could monitor Abby's doings. And that's how he learned about the courier being summoned, and that's how he found her flat, and that's how they ended up like this. Back at the police station, Cassie and Pugh is taking over the office of Roy Grace, of course, the ex-office of Roy Grace, and the phone call comes in, and this phone call is from Australia. It's regarding the victim found in the trunk of the car that got winched out from the lake. And they found a breast implant in the woman victim, and the number of the implant takes them to a Brighton surgery, and obviously they want some assistance from the Brighton cops, and Cassie and Pugh gives them a little attitude, of course, and notes down the number, notes down the request, but he's in no rush to pass on the information or do anything with it for the moment. That's Cassian for you. Now, back in 2001, in New York City, Ronnie Wilson obviously realizes that's his chance to change his identity. So he dumps his cell phone and starts to scheme how to obtain some money. He's got some stamps. He can't sell those, but unfortunately, because of the World Trade Center terror attack, all the business is shaky at the moment, so no one's willing to purchase his stamps for a decent price. But the pressure's on, he's got no money, and he needs to move fast as well. So he decides that he's going to sell some stamps under the value, but still cashes in enough to get some documentation, forged IDs like driver's license and the passport. Eventually, as he hangs around in New York, now having some spendable money, he visits this Moscow bar. That's the name of the bar, the Moscow bar. And he meets a few Russian people, and these Russian guys are into all sorts of business, and obviously after a few drinks of vodka and telling tall tales, they put him in touch with someone who can forge IDs. So Ronnie Wilson forks out money and gets two kinds of identifications, driver's license, and a couple of passports too, one for the wife. Now, with all said this, he has plans to go back to England. In the meantime, back in England, still in 2001, his wife is really worried, seeing the television news, hearing what happened in the World Trade Center. She's completely in shock. Beside that, the coming weeks reveal that Ronnie Wilson has serious debt. All his tales and businesses that he spoke about are basically bankrupt or on the verge of it. The car gets repossessed. The businesses get into administration. And technically, the wife ends up with a huge debt thanks to Ronnie Wilson, and she's completely crushed about these. We'll hear about them in a bit. According to the findings of Norman Potting, that Ronnie Wilson had a criminal record. Roy Grace figures is going to go to town,
look around the town centre of Brighton, and he knows where to find old school, old villains, and he needs to gather some information of Ronnie Wilson, and he figures that the best way to do is basically to find a couple of characters who are parts of crime families going back long time in Brighton. It doesn't take him long to locate Terry Bigelow, a name the police know for decades. The Bigelow family was running racketeering businesses, collection businesses, like debt collection businesses, and all sorts of stuff we can imagine back in the days. Now he's an old guy. Nevertheless, nearby Plum Square, Roy Grace finds him with a friend who used to be a henchman of his, Bigelow's henchman, and Roy Grace bumps into them, has a little chit chat. They're all respectful now, they're all old people. Like, hey, hello officer, you see, he says to his friend, he's always a good guy, he's a fair cop. All this nonsense, this bullshit, he gives Roy Grace. Roy Grace kinda ignores these sorts of mumblings and stuff because he needs information from Terry. So, as he's inquiring where they go in, Terry says they were about to have some lunch or breakfast or whatever, and Roy Grace tells them he buys them lunch. So they go to a local cafe and they have a breakfast and have a chat. And Roy Grace inquires about Wilson, of course. And Bigelow knows Wilson. He remembers him well. Also, he remembers his two wives. Now, this is new information for Roy Grace. Two wives? Yes, because Joanna Wilson, the victim in the storm drain, is the first wife. But then he had Lorraine as well. And Lorraine is also dead. Apparently, she killed herself jumping from the ferry. This Terry character is a well of information though, and has some more additional stuff to tell Roy. He tells about Hadcock, that Hadcock went to work in America. He knew Wilson too. And Ronnie Wilson and Hadcock being linked triggers connections now regarding the World Trade Center. And another information Terry Bigelow comes forward with is a bloke called Chad Skaggs. And he was part of this little gang. Wilson and Chad Skaggs known each other too. And Bigelow throws in the names, the Klingers, Sue and Steve Klinger, who are well known to police and never could have been pinned down back in the days. And Grace decides that he's going to send Glenn Branson and Bella Moy to interview them as well. And of course, Bigelow knew them all. Chad Skaggs has gone to Australia and stayed there. So it's another information that Roy Grace will have to investigate into. Now, with all this information at hand, Roy Grace hurries back to the police station and decides they're going to expand the investigation and it's going to be a worldwide inquiry. So he's going to appoint two of his colleagues to go to Australia and look into the situation there regarding Chad Skaggs and the victim that's been found in the trunk. He himself will visit New York City because he's going to have to trace Wilson. And we'll see how this goes. And hey, we're Brighton location in Pelham Square. Pelham Square was a small, elegant square of Regency terraced houses with a railed park in the center.
the benches near the Trafalgar Street entrance had always been popular lunch spots for local office workers on fine days. Now with the workplace smoking ban, they seemed even more popular. Few of the people eating their sandwiches or having lunchtime cigarettes took notice of, or indeed have noticed, the ragbag assortment of people clustered around another bench at the far end of the park. That's what we are at. We're at the far end of the park. And it is indeed. This lonely bench here. This is well known. I came out early. It's around about, I don't know, 9:30 in the morning. So it's rather early. So it's not that busy yet. Park just opened, actually it's shut after 4 o'clock in the fall or autumn time till April, May. In the winter it's a bit shorter, in the summer it will be open a bit longer. Anyhow, it just had been opened, and in the book Roy comes about here around lunchtime probably, or something, or 1 o'clock, and that's how he meets Bigelow, just outside. Nevertheless, the description of the park, of this bench we are at now, it's quite accurate actually, because in few hours there will be some druggies come around here probably, knocking out the odd bag of dope or something. They are popular for that, hey. That is the bench where we just been. And as you can see, closing the park doesn't stop the birds shitting all over it. Actually, these so-called nicer benches, or peaceful benches, are not as clean as the dubious one. I mean, that's where they normally spread the buzz, don't they? Little baggy as well, you see. But again, I do think the area's description is quite accurate. And this is the area where actually Roy bumps into Terry Bigelow. Heading along this stretch, sees the park, describes the benches as I read from the book just earlier, and somewhere around here on this stretch of road he probably bumps into Bigelow. So yeah, this is the Paham Square then, and the cafe. So it could be any which one of them really, because there's plenty in the street, Trafalgar Street that is. There's a coffee, for example, cafe, coffee tar. There's one tucked away in that street. All in all, there's plenty here. As for they state in the book that it's a workman's cafe, there they go. I don't know which one it could be, considering it's been many years since the book. Some of the stores, cafes have changed, but yeah, you get the idea. That's another coffee, the green one, the guy's smoking outside. Sydney Street is just off the corner from the Pelham Square. So we can't really establish which one Roy Grace and Terry Bigelow and his mate walk in. But yeah, you get the idea of the area surrounding it, which is nearby Cleo's house, to say that, because Cleo's apartment block, the converted warehouse, is around the corner as well. So quite central, and family of Grace, of course. It would be, as he's a Brighton born and bred cop. So hey.
We've been to Brighton location at Lamb Square, just there. Let's get back to the deep dive. After having Abby kept hostage in her own home for hours and hours, mostly half a day or more, Ricky threatens to torture her, slaps her about a bit, but eventually it comes to the point that he wants his stamps back, that he reckons Abby stolen. Now eventually Abby gives in and tells that she put the stamps into a place called Southern Deposit, and it's in a deposit box. So Ricky lets her go, and they walk down and sit into a Ford Focus and drive to the Southern Deposit. When they arrive to the establishment, they go down to the basement where the safe deposit boxes are, and Ricky obviously snatches the key from her, opens the deposit box and finds it empty. He just shouts abuse, but finds himself alone in this basement space. Abby runs for it. She runs through the building, out to the parking lot, and into a nearby furniture store. There, he asks one of the clerks to call a taxi to a back entrance, which turns out to be a fire exit, because she doesn't feel well, she claims. The clerk is helpful. She gets a taxi within a few minutes and a glass of water. She gets in the cab and asks the cab driver to go to Eastbourne. Abby visits her mum. Ricky eventually goes to Eastbourne too, figuring that's where Abby had gone. And lo and behold, he sees her getting into the taxi from her mum's house, follows the taxi, and Abby wanting a new cell phone. In the shopping district, the taxi Ricky's following from a safe distance gets out of the cab, gets into the shop, Abby does, and Ricky just waits on the curbside. Even a traffic warden approaches him, but he just says that I'm waiting for my mom, she has dementia, something me nuts and all that. Traffic warden gives him 5 more minutes. The taxi is still idling on the other side of the street, just by the shop. And after the interruption by the traffic warden, he notices the taxi cab starts going again. So Ricky follows it. And he's got this device, GSM 3060. That's a device that can tap cell phones. And he keeps a hand on it, he keeps it nearby, just in case Abby makes a phone call. Obviously that's how Ricky had found out details about her. After a while, the cab takes strange directions, pulls over again, and the couple gets in. It turns out Ricky was on a wild goose chase. He got tricked. Now he gets really, really mad and decides that he's going to take things a notch up. And he has a plan, of course, involving Abby's mom. Just before the briefing, Roy drops by Pugh's office, Roy's ex-office. And then he learns about the Australians having called. And Pugh received the phone call, but so far had done nothing about it. And now Pugh finds excuses, saying that he was gonna pass on the info, but unfortunately got too busy and all that. Roy's not happy about it, but hey, at least he knows it now. The fourth briefing of Operation Dingo. Bella Moy has checked with the USA, and Joanna Wilson has never entered the country as far as the officials are concerned. Prior the 9/11 terror attack, it used to be the Immigration and Naturalization Agency that handled border crossing,
after 9/11, it merged with US Customs and it became Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE. Well, now we have a bit different opinion of them, right? In 2026, I mean. But anyway, AJ Boutwood, having light duties after her incident, and now she's back on the team, has checked family trees of the ladies involved, and Lauren Wilson's family tree yields a stepbrother, and he was not a fan of Lorraine, but apparently, according to the stepbrother, she had inherited a lot of money and then traveled to the US, never to be seen again. Glenn Branson and Bella Moy had contacted a guy called Steve Kingler, and the guy said that nobody like Jonah Wilson. It checks out with what Barry Bigelow told Roy Grace. She wasn't a favorite, and apparently she ended up with nothing because Ronnie Wilson's companies and everything just collapsed. He was deeply in debt. Obviously her car got repossessed by the bank, then the house, and she ended up renting a place. But in 2002, some insurance paid out. An insurance, £1.5 million. And then, because of the 9/11, an international deal had been done, and just shy of $2.5 million have been fast-tracked for anyone's family who's involved in the 9/11 catastrophe. Anyone who had died and had families would get paid, to the dismay of a family, because the family said that she was living on handouts. Nobody really understood that she had money. Nobody knew. She secreted it. And no one knows where it's gone. And apparently she left a suicide note and jumped off the New Haven Dieppe ferry, but somehow ended up in the storm drain. Branson also had found connections, so everyone who worked on the floor of the World Trade Center where Donald Hadcock worked perished. So they reckon it's very likely that Wilson perished as well. Actually, his wallet had been sent back to his then wife, and though the insurance company weren't happy, they still paid out. So that's the connection with Ronnie Wilson and Donald Hadcock is established. Also, Branson has looked into Chet Skaggs, and he's wanted by the Brighton CID. And apparently some sadomasochistic games gone wrong in the 90s. He's fled to Australia. The police never chased him up. And ending the briefing, Roy Grace dispatches Nick Nichol and Norman Potting to Australia to see the body that's been found in the boot of the car that's been winched out from the river. And he himself will visit New York City to look into the situation with 9/11 and Ronnie Wilson. And here we are at the title hunt. In this book, the title is said on page 291. And actually, it's kind of sad, because it's a strange way as it's put, because it's not the exact title, even though it is in a way. So, let me read just this little saying, this little
conversation. So I wouldn't have time to go and see him. You're not going on vacation. You're going to get a job done, Grace chided. Nick Nicole nodded. Following a dead woman's footsteps, Norman Potting said. And Grace had a hunch, maybe following a dead man's too. So, it's like this. Basically, it does have the title, and it doesn't, in one go. And nowhere else we would find this or similar in the book, so we have to make do with this. Let's get back to the deep dive. Back in 2001, Ronnie Wilson finally gets back to the UK, and in the early hours surprises Lorraine, the wife. She's shocked, and she actually thought that her husband had died in 9/11, but that was the plan, of course. And now Ronnie reveals his plan, which is to change identities and disappear with the insurance money that's to be paid out shortly. He's got the passport on the surname of Wilson's, on the surnames of Nelson, and they will pack and leave the UK for good, go someplace far and live up the dough they're gonna get. That is the plan. After Ricky followed the taxi all the way to Peacehaven, he decides enough's enough and puts his plans to motion. First of all, he drives the Focus he has back to Abby's place, parks in front of it, thinking if Abby returns, she's gonna see the car and would be scared to go home. And as he was observing Abby from the beginning, from a Renault van parked among the cars with a for sale sign on it, that's where Rick had been hiding for days, observing Abby. The Renault eventually starts up and Ricky drives this back to Eastbourne and kidnaps Abby's mom. Duncan Trout is a newbie. His first day as a beat copper, a Bobby. His sergeant tells him to look into a woman's case who reportedly been distressed by the name Catherine Jennings. Now this is Abby under a different name. And Duncan Trout takes it as a great opportunity to do the job that he signed up for and goes and looks into the situation. But once approaching the building where Catherine Jennings lives, finds no one home, but also notices a car, a Ford Focus, sitting nearby the building, and it has a fine stuck to the windshield. Later on, this car will be claimed as well. That will tell Trout that it's been sitting there for over 24 hours. And we'll find out what this has to do with the case. But while there, Duncan meets the building super, the caretaker, and learns that the elevator, the lift, is being repaired because it got vandalized. And Duncan figures he speaks to the mechanics later, so does his little investigation in the building and learns that the motor, the engine of the lift has been tampered with. He notes it down, speaks to the caretaker who talks about Kate Jennings in flat 82 as a wealthy looking woman, but as the caretaker lives in the other side of the block, he's not sure about her movement, and since she's in a short flat on the top of the building, he can't really tell much useful information at this point.
So Duncan eventually leaves the building with the details he'd learned, and he's going to pass it on to his superiors. Eventually, Glenn Branson and Bella Moy introduce the Klingers, the husband and wife Terry Bigelow had given as contact, and they figure that Laurie Wilson basically invested or made the money disappear into stamps, like old collectible stamps. And that's a clue they're gonna have to investigate further. And while Roy Grace is on the airport, just heading to New York City, Glenn phones Roy, shares this information. Bella Moy requests the stamp dealer's addresses in Brighton, so while Roy Grace will check out some dealers in New York City, Bella Moy and Glenn Branson will trial Brighton for stamp dealers, and eventually they will find one that people they look for or dealing with, because stamps will become some interesting focus of this investigation. So Glenn Branson and Bella Moy hit the streets going through the stamp shops from the list they have compiled. And soon enough they happen upon Hoax Shop. That's a curio shop full of collectibles and stamps, of course. And they're known as stamp dealers in town, just down the road from the Brighton station where the storm drain body had been found. As they go into the shop, they find two ladies in there. One is the owner. And they have a chat with her, and they find out that Ronnie Wilson rings a bell. And it turns out that one of the ladies, the owner's lady's mum, used to deal with Ronnie Wilson. So they call her out from the back of the shop, and they find out that Ronnie used to sell and buy stamps, but nothing too expensive, few £100 worth. And they don't do high-end stamps in this shop. Mostly they dabble into small ticket stamps. But we also find out that just after Ronnie Wilson had died, Laurie Wilson came in, wanted to sell some stamps, few £100 worth of stamps again, saying that that was left behind by the husband. And upon asking the right questions, the two detectives find out that if someone had big ticket items, the shop wouldn't deal with them, but they would direct the patron to a high-end stamp dealer who lives on Dyke Road. So far, he's the only knowledgeable person who deals with exclusive, expensive stamps, and that would be Hugo Haggerty. Hugo Haggerty, who lives on Dyke Road in a swanky big house, and that will be the next port of call for the two detectives. When they arrive to Hugo Haggerty's house on Dyke Road, they're invited in, but Hugo's in a rush. In 20 minutes time he's got a game due, and he wants to make it, of course. Well, of course, he says that it's okay to have a little chat. As they sit down in his swanky lounge, in his room, his ante room, as they sit down and have a little chit-chat about stamps, Hugo Haggerty, though now an old guy, but still dabbles into stamps, he says, keeps a finger on the pulse. He remembers Ronnie very well. He knows that he died in 9/11, and he says that he always thought that Ronnie Wilson was somewhat a dodgy character, because the stamps he bought and sold wasn't always in proper shape as provenance is concerned, and Hugo Haggerty
had some concerns and occasionally turned him down, but sometimes he made business with him, and they tend to get along all right. And when the cops asked him about Lauren Wilson, Hugo Haggerty knows that she'd also passed away. So he says, what the hell? She swore him secrecy years before about her visiting him and said that he's got some insurance money, some £1.5 million, and she'd like to purchase stamps for it. And that she would come into more money after the 9/11 catastrophe payout would happen. That would be a bit more than £1.5 million. And she'd like to buy stamps for those too. And Hugo Haggerty is willing to help her, of course, for some commission, but tells the detectives that it's not as easy as it sounds, because the stamp world is always on the lookout, they're worried. Therefore, he started to purchase batches of stamps, sheets of stamps, from here, from there, fronted the money and compiled together a collection for her. And Lauren Wilson would pay for it afterwards, and the deal was done. And everyone was happy until Hugo learns that she'd passed away, but never heard about her, obviously, from her either, ever since, until just now the detectives arrived to his door. And when Branson and Bell asked him if he could compile a list of the stamps he had sold to Laurie Wilson, Hugo says that yeah, he would do that, but he needs to go to this game first. He really doesn't want to miss this. So he agrees that he's gonna see the detectives later on by tea time, and by then he will have a list. Just before the detectives turn to leave Haggerty to go to his game, though, Haggerty is asked one more question by Branson if he knows any stamp dealer from Australia. And after a few seconds of thinking, Haggerty says yes, he does. It's Chet Skaggs. And when the cops ask him if he dealt with him or deals with him, Haggerty shakes his head and no, he wouldn't do that, he says. He got stung once because as Chet lives in Australia, he wanted to buy some Australian stamps from Chet Skaggs, and they were not in the condition Chet promised him it would be, and when they arrived in the mail order, he was let down, and when he complained to Chet, he just said, sue me. And since Haggerty only parted from a couple of grand, he says, it wasn't worth suing. With this, the cops walk out and prepare to meet him later in the afternoon. Roy Grace has arrived to America, and there he's greeted by two of his pals he's met on international police meetings, which he sometimes attends. And Pat Lynch and Dennis Baker are his pals, and they're going to aid him in his investigation. They will visit the 9/11 site, Ground Zero, and obviously try for the clues of Ronnie Wilson and stamps, because obviously Operation Dingo is about stamps, as it turns out, as he had earlier received a call from Branson regarding Ronnie's interest in high-value stamps. And while all this is going on, Norman Potting and Nick Nicol are on their way to Australia. They are born already, they're in mid-flight, and Norman Potting is reading a porn mag, embarrassing the hell out of Nick Nicol. As the stewardess comes about, sees a big fold-out poster of some naked chick, Nick Nicol is sinking into his seat. Norman Potting just doesn't give a damn. That's Potting for you. Anyway, we catch up with them later as well. The next day, drunk and tired, the new Bobby on the beat goes around Abby's house again, not finding her in, but this time finding the Ford Focus clamped by the house and radios in the license plate and inquires about who the owner could be. And soon enough it comes back as it's a rental Ford and it's been rented by an Australian called Chad Skaggs. Now with Chad Skaggs being near Abby's house, obviously the police and Branson puts two and two together and they realize that she's in mortal danger. Abby's on the run. She's all freaked out now as Chad Skaggs, Ricky, would have kidnapped her mom. And he goes to sell her stamps at Haggerty's. And first she goes home, sees the clamped Ford Focus, but figures that Ricky couldn't be there, and sneaks up to her apartment and gets the stamps out of their hiding place, which is in the bathroom where she was kept tied up just a day ago or so, and the stamps are behind the tiles. She gets them out and takes them to Haggerty. As she gets to the Dyke Road, Haggerty looks at the stamps and receives a phone call in the meantime, and that's Glenn Branson. And Haggerty hints that Abby's there and refuses to buy the stamps as well because she comes up with this story about clearing an owned attic. And Haggerty finds it dodgy and reels a few phone numbers off to Abby, who she should contact if she wants to sell these stamps. And also Haggerty suggests that she breaks up the stamps because altogether they're worth like £4 million. Haggerty is prepared to pay £2.5 million only if there is provenance to them. And of course provenance is not likely to come from Abby because these stamps technically belong to Chad Skaggs, so he thinks anyway. So Abby leaves Haggerty and has this feeling that she's being followed, maybe by the cops, and she ducks and dives through the city, getting a taxi that she'd ordered from Haggerty's house, and gets to Hoke's stamp shop by the station where Bello and Branson had just been, and sells the stamps well under price, but takes the money, and then she continues her way hide and seeking through the town, receiving message from Ricky again about her mom, that they're gonna have to meet up at a location that will Ricky tell her later. And eventually she realizes that she will need some serious help, but by then Branson catches up to her because obviously she'd been followed by police as per Haggerty suggested the police to look into her, and soon enough she's in an interview room as a witness. Soon enough now things get unraveled and the lines of inquiry start to meet, so let's check out what's going on in the United States. After some sightseeing, Roy Grace is taken to Ground Zero and explained about how this 9/11 catastrophe had entailed not only the damages and the shocks, but also from the side of the American government that started to dispense free money, technically to those who suffered or their families.
Also the volunteer system they had, that volunteers started to turn up just after the incidents and collect the debris, belongings. And in a flashback earlier in the book, we find out that our disappearing man, Ronnie Wilson, fought ahead and handed, as a volunteer, handed his singed wallet that he burnt a little bit to one of these people collecting these items. Hence it had ended up at the wife's house in England a few weeks or months later. But that was the plan. And all these little details we find out from the cops. And also there's a list compiled about stamp dealers in New York. Some of them are nearby the World Trade Center's location. And one of these shops that they visit is Abe Miller's stamp shop. Now Abe Miller remembers a person who came in straight after 9/11. This person had phoned before, and then he turned up with a bunch of stamps wanting to sell. But Abe told him that he's unlikely to pay good money, if any at all, because the stamp business is not at its highest at the moment, considering the 9/11 situation. And when Roy Grace asked him if he was Ronnie Wilson, the guy says, nah, it wasn't Ronnie Wilson, but he can check. And he checks the logbook, goes back years, but this guy has this handwritten little logbook of every deal he makes in that stamp shop, and obviously because of the date, just after 9/11, in 2001, obviously sticks out like a sore thumb. He would remember, and it does. And the name that is noted down in his logbook is none else than Nelson, Dennis Nelson. As we know, readers, that the forged passports are for the Nelson family. With this information, Roy quickly phones ahead to the UK and shares this information about the stamps and the Nelson name. This call gets to Branson, and Branson, while interrogating Abby, or Katie Jennings, as she's at this point known to them, basically realizes that the Nelsons and Chet Skaggs are linked. And also Branson is trusted to phone to Australia and talk to Potting and Nick Nicol about this stamp information and the Nelson name. And obviously the lines of inquiry will continue to meet there as well. In Australia we find Chet Skaggs has an old coin and stamp dealer shop. His name is on the banner. They go in, there's a different dude, this dodgy one, and Potting shows him the picture of Ronnie Wilson. Guy refuses to speak or share any information about that. Eventually, when the Australian police trying to hint that they can turn his life upside down, look through the shop stuff and see if there's anything stolen or whatever. Eventually the guy's tongue gets loose and tries and starts speaking. And he says that this guy in the picture reminds him of a person who used to deal with Chet Skaggs, and that would be Nelson. So Nelson is now triggered by the investigation in America, and obviously Nelson knows Skaggs, and Glenn Branson tells it to Abby back in the UK, and she tells the tale about how this bunch met, and now Potting and Nicol learned this information too. So now we know that the stamps basically bounce back and forth among Chet Skaggs, Nelson or Wilson and Abby. Eventually the stamp guy in Australia produces an address book He has notes of his customers or Cheskak's customers, if you like, with the addresses in it. So now they have Nelson's address. The police take Spotting and Nico to this apartment block where he's supposed to live. As they approach door 59, which is supposed to be Nelson's dwelling, they smell some horrid stench. Neighbors been moaning about it, according to the janitor of the building, and he was just gonna go into the apartment when the police rang, so he waited up and decided it's better if they go all together. And rest assured, this time no dead body is found, but spoiled food in the freezer, on the counter, but not much in the way of clues. So they know that this Nelson character is not going to be back. With this information, they leave the apartment, and Potting and Nico will soon return to the UK. Roy Grace arrives back from Gatwick Airport to his house, and after this exhausting flight from the United States, with all the clues in his mind and to the case, he just wants to get home, get changed, and speak to his colleagues and move the investigation a bit forward, when he realizes this crime of scene investigation going on around his house. As he approaches Zefferon, Alfonso Zefferon, we met him before, stands there and tells him that his garden is being searched. They're using a GPR, which is a ground penetrating radar, and they're looking for Sandy for the command of Cassian Pugh, as a court case file is being investigated. Now Roy Grace is fuming, obviously. He demands answers, but he's not likely to get any on the spot straight away. But he's going to take it upstairs in the police. What will become of it, we'll see it a bit later. Straight away, Roy Grace goes back to headquarters and storms into Cassian Pugh's office. Tells him right off, swears at him, what the fuck's going on, what you think you're doing? And then Pugh reveals that he had spoken to Sandy's parents earlier in Seaford and didn't find the investigation satisfactory. Neither the parents did, neither did Pugh. And that's why he decided to do the investigation again with modern technology, like this ground penetrating radar thing. And eventually Roy Grace goes to Skerritt. Jack Skerritt is the new boss just above Alison Vospa, and tells him the situation. And Jack Skerritt says that after the briefing Roy is gonna give to the team and sum up the findings, he'll speak to Pugh, and that will be it. And we see where they go with it. Eventually, after the briefing, because everyone gathered the information and Branson had interviewed Abby, they set up a plan that they're going to go and follow Abby, who's in a rented Honda this time, and follow her and trying to save her mum and capture Chad Skaggs. And that's a plan to be formed for that night. So there's not much time to deal with this problem that Cassian just caused in Roy's life. And after the briefing, as they sit in Skerritt's office, Pugh is arrogant, and now time's running out, the call's coming in that they have to assemble the team and start up this operation, and Skerritt suddenly suggests that Cassian Pugh should ride with Roy Grace to observe how investigations go on this side of the country. And because time is the essence, Roy Grace leaves it at this, with a promise to himself and Scary that they get back to this situation and talk it through, which they agree in, and they hit the road to sort this case out once and for all. So the operation gets the go-ahead, and covert police following the rented Honda driven by Abby. And the location they're gonna meet with Chet Skaggs is on Beachy Head. Chet Skaggs brings the mom and needs the stamps. Abby has the stamps. So the showdown is coming soon. Now everything's set up on both sides for the showdown. On Ricky's side, he phoned ahead and told Abby that the location will be Beachy Head. Beachy Head is a 500-foot drop. It's a cliffside. Ricky organizes that Abby needs to be at the Beachy Head Hotel by the parking lot. Ricky's gonna have the Renault van with her mom kidnapped in it, and Abby's to take the stamps and meet Ricky there. In the meantime, on the police's side, there's a stakeout organized already, as Branson kept in touch with Abby. So undercover police staked out the Beachy Head Hotel and its surrounding area with unmarked cars, using even an ice cream van that's driven by police this time. An ice cream van is a normal sight nearby the area, especially in the summer time and anytime the weather's good. So it's not unusual to see one. Roy Grace, in the meantime, is staring down the road, getting to the rendezvous himself, and next to him in the passenger seat is Cassie and Pew. Obviously, he's all moaning, whinging now. And Roy Grace is really pissed off about having him in tow, but at this point he can't do too much about it. Abby gets to Beachy Head in her rented Honda, that's an off-roader, and Ricky instructs her to leave the mobile phone on, put it on the dashboard so he can hear the engine running. She's to get out of the car, grab the stamps. Ricky's gonna walk up to her car, she hands over the stamps, and if it's all cool, she can go and save Mom and Ricky can drive off. That's the plan. So that they're facing off now. Ricky parks the van rather close to the edge of the cliff. Obviously, the plan is, if he's not happy with the stamps, then the van can be pushed over with the other car, driven to it. So Mums is gonna die, and maybe Abby too, as she's trying to save her. Now that is the plan. But Ricky doesn't know about the stakeout, obviously. He's kind of lost control of the situation in recent hours. And he's freaking out too. Anyhow, Abby, sitting in her off-roader, the envelope she has for the stamps, she fills it with stubs and the manual and stuff she finds in the compartment of the door. Seals the envelope, gets out of the car, leaving the mobile phone on and the engine running. Ricky's coming closer, making remarks, telling her how stupid she is. Just a notorious nonsense that he would say. So as Ricky's giving it large, takes the envelope from Abby. As he looks into him, Abby kicks him in the balls. He doubles over and she makes a run for it to save her mom from the van. As Ricky's scrambling to the Honda to get in and knock the van over the cliff edge, suddenly the ice cream van pulls in between the cars, between the vehicles, the van and the Honda. So he has to steer away, Ricky. And now a little bit chase begins. In the meantime, Roy Grace makes it to the scene and obviously gets out of the car and wants to get into the action. But his beloved Alfa Romeo gets knocked over the cliffside with Cassie and Pew in it. Cassie and Pew is lucky because the Alfa Romeo, though, gets knocked over the cliff's edge. The cliff's edge continues in a rather steep gradient of slope, but it's heavily wooded and it has loads of undergrowth, and it goes on for a good 100 foot, and after that we have a 400 something drop. But the car gets tangled in the bushes and gets wedged amongst trees. And Cassian's upside down in it, his seatbelt's on, car's wobbling just near the cliffside's drop basically. And eventually Roy Gray's risking his own life for this bastard Cassian Pew. And he climbs down, clambers down, heavy gusty winds blowing there. Cars wobbling, Cassian screaming and moving in it. Roy Gray's trying to calm him, but obviously the man won't calm down. But soon enough, Roy manages to get near the car, get Cassian's hand, and when Cassian screams, "Come on, don't leave me, man, save me," and Roy says to him that I'm actually really worried about my car, or more worried about my car. Yeah, his beloved Alfa will be smashed. He manages to pull Cassian Pew out. They climb up the slope back onto the beachy head, safer side, and his car eventually falls into the depth of the cliffside and smashes to the bottom, totaling itself. Well, emergency and rescue teams will be busy on beachy head for the forthcoming half day or day. They will have to deal with the wreck being pulled out, secure the area, collect clues. So Roy Grace can go home now, and the operation is over. They arrest Chet Skaggs, and next day sees them in the office. They interrogate Chet Skaggs, mostly gives up everything, they don't know yet. They give the stamps back to Abby because they're not stolen. Because however the stamps came to the possession of hers, or Chet Skaggs, or Ricky if you like, or Ronnie Wilson, they were always under the counters of the books, and they never been reported stolen. At one point they have been bought. So Abby gets them back, but the police still need to find Ronnie Wilson. He's wanted for 2 murders, of course, the 2 wives. And lo and behold, the police, now befriended with Abby, especially Branson, keeps track on her. And eventually they find her under a different name, booking an EasyJet flight. As they track her down, she goes to see Ronnie Wilson because she wants to get rid of the stamps. She wants to sell them stamps, and Ronnie's interested in the stamps. But because officially Abby couldn't be tracked, police have to approach her, and eventually she does tell them where they can locate Ronnie Wilson, and he gets arrested. And Hugo Haggerty, the stamp dealer, won't make any reports regarding Abby's stamps, so officially it's hers, and she goes to have a holiday. And after the police's side of the story concluded, Abby is sitting in the sun, sipping cocktails, and the woman approaches her if she's having a nice day. And in the final lines of the book we learn it's Sunday. And that concludes the book. And this concludes the story. And there's not much more to say about it that I haven't before. And I think the only notable aspect is the Sandy aspect, Roy's missing wife, that we close this book with, basically as a cliffhanger. But I deliberately don't really dwell on her background story that we find out from the books, little hints, little clues, because I will make a video relating to Sunday, but I won't do that until we're not through most of the books, because the developments are just not stacking up yet to make a decent video. So I'll leave it at like this, and if you really curious and you haven't read the books yet, right, go ahead and read them. So I think that's enough of the story for now. That's enough of me. Signing off now.